Welcome to the Renegade Nutrition Podcast, where we discuss all things wellness.
I'm Eleni Welch, nutritionist.
And I'm Kay Boyer, health enthusiast. Welcome back, Renegades.
Welcome, Renegades.
Welcome. Today is another amazing guest who we've had on before. She's a genius. She has revolutionized the world's health. She is the creator of the GAPS diet, and which we've had her on before, so you should know this. But today we're getting into some deep topic. I'm excited for today.
Yes. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Natasha Campbell. We are so honored to have you on the podcast again. That episode that we originally released about the GAPS diet, which stands for Gut and Psychology Syndrome, or Gut and Physiology Syndrome, was one of our most played episodes. Still to this date, it's in our top 10.
Yep, most shared.
Most shared. And it was for 2023, it was our most shared episode. And what I love about that is it tells me that people are hearing these episodes. They're hearing, hey, this information could help somebody.
Yes.
And then they're sending that information to somebody to help them. And so the message gets spread, which was just really exciting for me. So I am really thrilled.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here again.
Yes, we're thrilled to have you on. And today the topic that we're going to get into is vegetarianism. So Dr. Natasha has a book called Vegetarianism Explained, which I highly recommend to all of our listeners to have a better understanding of the concept of vegetarianism. And so today we're going to talk about that. We're going to go through some questions I had from the book, and I'm sure the conversation is going to unfold as we discuss it. But boy, it is a topic that is very misunderstood and very misrepresented in our world, and we're going to bring some light and truth to the topic today. So hopefully you walk away feeling educated. But welcome, Dr. Natasha.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, vegetarianism is being promoted.
Yes.
Very, very heavily in the Western world in particular. And many people fall for that propaganda, for that push. And we need to understand where the propaganda comes from and why.
Yes.
And it pushes usually on ignorance, on emotions, telling people that they are saving the planet, that it's the healthiest lifestyle, and that they're being kind to animals and kind to humanity, and, lots of benevolence comes that way.
Yes.
So we need to understand where it's coming from and why.
Yeah. So explain to us some of the propaganda that going vegetarian will save the planet. Why is that not true? And what is the truth?
I got interested in vegetarianism quite a few years ago when I started getting in my clinic lots of young people with mental illness and physical illness, serious situations. Really, people ruin themselves because of vegetarianism. Before they became vegetarian or vegan, they were healthy young people. They were healthy kids. And that made me very interested. And the first thing I did, I started looking for scientific studies on the subject. And having looked through it, I've realized that there isn't not one scientific study we can trust on this subject. All of them have been conducted by pro-vegetarian lobby, funded, incorrectly designed, incorrectly analyzed. The conclusions are incorrect. The biggest lie is the China study, which the mainstream is showing into everybody's face, saying that this is the proof that we should all be vegan. And so having discovered that there is no science we can rely on, I started looking at the basic sciences, at the science of biology, zoology, physiology, and clinical experience. My own clinical experience and clinical experience of other doctors, holistic doctors in the world. And based on all of that information, I have written this book called Vegetarianism Explained. It's not a thick book. It's quite a small book. It's got nice pictures. And it specifically explains why vegetarianism is not a very good idea and how it all works, how the plant foods work against the animal foods in the human body. So Mother Nature gave us two groups of foods. She gave us plant foods. These are grains, beans, nuts, seeds, vegetables, fruit, vegetable oils, everything coming from the plant kingdom. And Mother Nature gave us animal foods, meat, fish, eggs, and dairy. And these two groups of foods work in the human body very, very differently. The basic scientific fact that I have discovered from 1930s and 40s, that the only things on our planet that can truly digest plant matter are microbes. Only microbes, balanced microbial communities, can digest plants, nothing else. So Mother Nature used this scientific fact in designing a digestive system of a cow, or a goat, or a deer, or an antelope, or giraffe, or another herbivorous animal. She gave them 3 or 4 enormous stomachs full of microbes, called the rumen. The cow has this group of stomachs is called a rumen. It's this balanced and rich microbial community in these several stomachs that digest the grass for the animal. The cow doesn't digest the grass herself. It's the microbial community in her rumen that does the job for her. They break it down into proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, and other things which absorb and feed the cow's body. We human beings don't have a rumen. We have one small stomach which produces hydrochloric acid and some other elements of the stomach juice. The stomach here, I'm talking about the small organ where the food lands after you swallowed it. Right? There's a tube called esophagus. When you swallow food, it goes along that tube and then lands in that stomach. There's a confusion in the English language because sometimes English people call the whole belly stomach. And that confuses people. No. We talk about that small organ which is sitting right underneath the esophagus and where your food lands and where the first steps of digestion happen. So we produce hydrochloric acid in our stomach. The acidity can be below 2, below 1 pH when we're hungry. Very hostile environment for microbes. That is why in a healthy human, there are hardly any microbes in the stomach. It's almost sterile. There are very few that are hanging around there and surviving in there. Remember, only microbes can digest plants. So plants, when we swallow them, they sit in our stomach, not doing much. They're indigestible for a human stomach. However, the stomach juice, hydrochloric acid, pepsin, and other elements, they are perfectly designed to digest meat, fish, eggs, and dairy. These are the only foods that get properly digested, properly broken down. And when the whole mass moves out of the stomach into several meters of intestines, and that is where absorption of food happens, the only things that can be absorbed are the things that are properly digested. So again, meat, fish, eggs, and dairy. Plants were not digested in the stomach. And they don't get digested in the intestines either. They just produce some juices, they give us vitamin C, they give us some other minerals, vitamins, some cofactors, but the bulk of what the human body is made from, they cannot provide the plants. What is the human body made from? Protein. About 70% by weight is water, 90% by molecular count, and the dry weight is 50-50, protein and fat. When we analyze human protein and human fat in a laboratory, we find that in their biochemical composition, they're very similar to proteins and fats we find in meat, fish, eggs, and dairy. So these are the only things that properly digest in our stomach, and then they can feed and maintain the physical structure we live in. Your heavy bones, your big muscles, your big brain, your lungs, your heart, your liver, your skin, all the organs in your body. Because human body renews itself all the time. It's not static. And in children, it's growing as well, the human body. Every cell in the human body has a short life. They work very hard, these cells. They get old, they die, they get removed, and new baby cells are born to replace them. So your body gives birth to trillions of new baby cells every day. In order to give birth to those cells, building materials are required. Proteins and fats of the right composition. And only animal foods can provide these building materials. So your body can maintain its physical structure, can grow in children and teenagers, and can repair any damage, if there has been any damage done. Plants have proteins, have fats in them, but in their biochemical structure, they're inappropriate for creating human proteins and human fat.
Right.
Some amino acids are missing, other amino acids are in excess, and fats are largely polyunsaturated, which are inappropriate for building the human physical structure. We need some polyunsaturated fats, but a tiny, tiny amount. Eating an apple or a salad or a handful of nuts will provide you with that. You don't need a lot on a daily basis. But what you need a lot of, and the bulk of fat consumption, need to be animal fats. Animal fats, lamb fat, beef fat, pork fat, goose fat, duck fat, butter, ghee, cream, these sort of things. So plants are indigestible for human beings, and they do not feed us. They are incapable of maintaining the physical structure of the human body. Only animal foods do that, and they digest well in our digestive system. So question is, why do we eat plants at all? Because they provide cleansing substances. They're powerful cleansers. They keep the human body clean on the inside, binding toxic metals, binding various poisonous chemicals and wastes in the body and removing them. They're very good at that. They provide some juices, some vitamins, some cofactors, some little things like that. So that's why we eat plants. And also they give us variety, colors, flavors, fun.
Right.
Yes, it's nice to have vegetables. It's nice to have plant matter. And the further south human beings live, the closer to tropics, the warmer the climate, the less energy they have to spend to keep themselves warm, to maintain their metabolism, the less animal foods they can survive on, and the more plant matter they can eat. But the further north people live, the colder the climate is, the more meat and fat the people need. That is why Northern Europeans, Iceland and Greenland, and all those tribes of people that were studied in north of Canada and Greenland and other places like that, they largely subsisted on meat and fat. They ate very few plants at all. So that is the basics of what people need to understand. Unfortunately, our doctors don't understand that. They need educating, and our scientists don't understand that. And of course, the general population doesn't understand that either. And that's what I describe in this book, Vegetarianism Explained. And here I've got a chapter on where the propaganda comes from. So it's a long answer to your question.
Yeah. No, it's perfect. Let's get into it.
That's right. So where this propaganda comes from, it comes from global corporations. The same small group of people owns all global corporations on our planet. Many of you know about this fact now. Many of you are getting this information. So they own the agriculture, they own the food industry, they own the pharmaceutical industry, they own the medical industry, they own the governments. And they dictate all the agricultural policies in the world. I'm an organic farmer. I have been an organic farmer now for 11 years. I've learned an awful lot because when we bought our piece of land and started farming on it, we wanted to produce our own food. We knew very little about how to go about it. So we've learned an awful lot. I'm writing a book on this subject now.
Oh, great.
Specifically for city people who would like to get out of the city and would like to start growing their own food.
That's awesome.
Who don't know where to start, what to do. We were in that boat. So now we've learned a lot. And what I've learned, a big fact, which I could not find anywhere else, but just through the sweat, that, that you put into all the land and through all the doing it practically with your own hands, that on an organic regenerative farm, here having animals producing meat, milk, and eggs is easy. Takes an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening. The rest of the day is free for you. You can even hold a full-time job.
I can confirm that is true.
Absolutely, that is true. You're just busy with your chickens and goats and the cow in the morning. You milk them, you let the chickens out, you feed them. And then if they're free-ranging, if they're on pasture, if they're under the sunlight, they will find their own food. They don't need you anymore. However, when it comes to producing vegetables, fruit, growing plant matter, that's where the hard labor is on an organic farm. It's non-stop, 24 hours a day. The weeds are incessant. The Nothing can be planned properly because every year is different. The sun shines less or more, it rains more or less, and then maybe some farmer sprayed something and all the bugs run away from his field and found my organic garden. You can do everything by the book, and your carrots just don't grow. And you don't know why, and you get a very poor harvest. So one year you get cabbages, another year you get beetroots, another year you get carrots. It's all very different, but something that was very successful last year, this year just doesn't happen. So the yield is unpredictable. So if you are in a commercial model where you have obligations and you have to provide so many tons of onions for your whoever they are, you're in a big pickle. You have to cut corners. You have to make sure that you do provide and you do supply these sort of things. So it's when it comes to the industrial agriculture, you find that these two things swap. Growing plants on an industrial scale is easy because the scientists have worked out decades ago the hybrid seeds, and all the seeds are pelleted. Every seed is coated in chemicals, and then they give the machine and give machines to them and chemicals and say, you spray this on day 5, you spray that on day 10, you spray that in 2 weeks, and it works. You get this beautiful, perfect fields, not a weed in sight, not a pest in sight, ideal looking, greenery, and the harvest is predictable and the yield is predictable, and they get their profit. But when it comes to animal husbandry in an industrial model, meat, eggs, and milk, that's when all the headache is. It's unprofitable because animals just don't comply with the industrial model. They get sick and they die.
Yeah.
Because all animals have been designed by Mother Nature, by the Creator, to be on pasture, under the sunlight, in nature. And the pasture has to be real. There should be more than 60 grasses and herbs in that pasture. And the cows and sheep and pigs and goats, they all should be out there, and chickens and turkeys on the pasture under the sunlight. What do industrial farmers do? They take them off pasture, lock them up in a prison, in a building where they never see the light of day, and feed them commodity crops and soya.
Yeah.
These things are inappropriate for the physiology of these animals and birds. They get sick, they develop cancer, they develop chronic inflammation, infertility, arthritis, they're all ill. That's why they get killed early before they develop cancers. And that is why every industrial farmer has to spend a lot of funds on constant antibiotics, constant steroids, on vet bills, and all sorts of things. So animal husbandry has been a pain for them, and it has been unprofitable and difficult for them for a long time. So they've invested, in the last several decades, they've invested billions into synthetic meat, synthetic milk, and synthetic eggs.
Wow.
These technologies are now being perfected, and these things are already in supermarkets. So real meat, real milk, and real eggs are a competition. So in parallel with working on these technologies of synthetics, they had to launch propaganda into the world that meat is bad for you, and milk is bad for you, and eggs are bad for you, and fat causes every disease, and every animal food is just terrible. And we should all stop eating them. And they have endless funds and endless power to influence scientific institutions all over the world, to pay thousands of scientists to provide them with the so-called scientific findings. So, and this propaganda everywhere. And, whenever you speak to anyone in the general public, they say, oh, well, there's a study in Finland where they've shown that beef fat causes this, that, and the other. People believe it just because it's scientific, despite the fact that organs which know that, like Cochrane Research and other groups of researchers who analyze published papers and published science, tell us that more than 90% of them are not worth the paper they're written on.
Right.
They're false. They're false. You cannot trust the science, particularly commercial science. So it is within the interests of global corporations to make every person on the planet vegan, because it's easy and profitable for them to grow plant matter, and difficult and unprofitable to produce animal foods.
Wow.
It's a simple business, sense for them.
Wow.
What's profitable What's unprofitable? And they employ the best psychologists in the world, the best filmmakers, the best professionals in every field, who are so good at creating believable propaganda.
Yep.
And it's particularly teenagers, young people that fall for it. And these people, they will film their own CAFO, their own confined animal factory operation, such as a pig farm or a chicken farm where the poor chickens just live in terrible conditions. They film their own cruel operations and then show them to the world and make such a twist on it that eating meat is bad.
Yep.
And nobody makes a film, nobody would push into people's attention films about proper farms, organic farms, real farms, where the farmer loves his animals, loves his soil, loves his birds, loves his gardens, loves his farm. These farmers will be delighted for you to come and visit them. They're very proud of it. You will not find refrigerators full of steroids and antibiotics there. You will not find bags of chemicals lying about. You will find happy, healthy animals, birds, gardens, plants, and land and soil. These are the kind of food that we're supposed to be eating. So coming to that, the important thing is for all of us now, and what many people don't realize, is to abandon supermarkets. So convenient to push that trolley, isn't it? In the supermarket. So convenient. Because who supplies supermarkets with their produce? Industrial agriculture.
Right.
You're eating chemicals. You're eating hybrids. You're eating GMOs. And also what you need to understand is that food is information. It's energy, just in a different form. Information. What kind of information food in the supermarket will carry from industrial agriculture? Information of greed, disease, suffering, pain, grief. How is that information going to give you good health?
Right.
But the food, if you buy it directly from an organic farmer that you have met, and we human beings feel each other. You can look them in the eye, you can feel, can I trust this person? Is this a good person? You can feel it. Nobody can deceive you in that sense.
Right.
If you buy their food, that meat, that milk, those eggs, those vegetables carry love, information of love. And that's the only information, the only energy that heals from any disease and gives us good health and vitality. That's why I recommend that every city dweller who are interested in having a healthy family and being healthy themselves need to abandon supermarkets, go to your local farmers market, or go online, find all these organic farms around your city, and on a weekend, just get your whole family in the car and go and visit the farm, or visit 2 or 3 farms. Meet the farmers, have a look how they're run, have a look how the animals are kept, and start buying all your produce directly from these farms. Because the only organic farms that survive are the ones that sell directly to their customer. There are no middlemen. Because governments are set in their place by corporations. They serve corporations. No matter what lies they give to the population, that from the people, for the people, whatever. The reality is they were put in place by corporations, and they're serving corporations. So they make it easy for industrial agriculture. They give them subsidies and don't put any legal barriers for them. When it comes to organic farmers, to real farmers, the government is a nightmare for them. The governments are their number one enemy because they just make their life as difficult as possible. So I say the only organic real farmers that survive are the ones who have a strong customer base, people who come and buy their produce directly from them. So not only you will be getting the best food in the world to keep yourselves healthy and well, but you will also support a good person,
right?
A good farmer, and probably a whole farming family. And if you get organized in this city and talk to your friends and family and form a group, then when there are enough people in that group, a farmer will be happy to deliver into the city, into one apartment, so everybody can come to that apartment and pick up their bits and pieces. So all it gets is just getting organized, rather than sort of going to the supermarket every day.
Absolutely.
Get good food, real food.
That's amazing.
Oh my gosh.
A beautiful model for, it's good for the earth, it's good for our hearts, it's good for your body. Like, it's a beautiful model.
And I just have goosebumps listening to you talk, because it's so the truth is so twisted.
Yes.
And it's so easy to believe the lie because that's all we see. And it's like, when you say it, Dr. Natasha, it's like so obvious.
Yeah.
It's so obvious, but it's so hard when you're in the midst of all the propaganda to really clearly see the truth. I have goosebumps just hearing you lay out this incredible truth that people have been so deceived on. Like, and it's just clear as day when you say it, because we're removed right now in this space from all the propaganda so we can hear the truth. But when you're bombarded with it in your daily life, on TV, in advertisements, in magazines, like when
in
documentaries, when that information is just pushed on you, it's so hard to see clearly because it's so clouded.
I was going to say,
professionally designed. All of it is professionally designed.
Yes.
They're the best psychologists, and they use psychotronics. The weapons which are called psychotronics, where they put a certain vibration of the screen of television, which puts your brain into a certain state, and you accept everything as the truth.
Oh, wow.
That they give you.
Like subliminal messages.
They think this weaponry, that's right, this weaponry is used on the population.
Wow. And I'll say personally that after watching some documentaries, I gave up meat for a good 6 months. And I told our listeners this before, but I felt so weak at the end of that 6 months. And I could tell like, oh, this is not good for my body. I actually now eat, and mostly before that, I love meat and I eat protein all the time. And I felt really weak even after 6 months. And then, so that I have two things to ask you. One is, how long do you think, a person would kind of notice that they don't feel good? And maybe if they're closer to the sunshine latitude, then it'd take a little longer. But then the other thing was the one documentary that did affect me was the blue zones. Can you talk on the blue zones, how maybe they were kind of more cherry picked, or because those are mostly vegetarian populations that live over 100. But can you kind of talk to that? Because that was one that convinced me to go vegetarian. But now I'm glad that I'm eating meat again. So talk to that.
I said the propaganda is very craftily designed, professionally designed, very, very well designed. And when you have a population that's unprepared, on one side you have professionals who are doing their best. On the other side you have people who are completely unprepared. It's easy for them to win, easy for them to convince you. But veganism, vegetarianism, where people eat some animal foods to sustain the physical structure of their bodies. Remember, only animal foods maintain and sustain the physical structure of your body. Only they feed you. Plants don't feed you, they only cleanse you. They do not feed you. And human beings can live without plants perfectly well. That is my clinical experience. I'll tell you about it a little bit later. So vegetarianism, when people eat eggs, eat good quality dairy, and at least occasionally eat meat and fish, can be sustained. And such cultures exist in India and some other countries around the world traditionally. I've been to India several times. I've researched this subject and met with the people. So all the people who live along waterways in India, on the coast of the oceans, along the lakes and rivers, the most important bit on their plate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is fish, seafood, or fish that they catch, or crustaceans that they catch in the water. That is the most important bit. So that's what sustains their physical bodies. So all their rice and vegetables and lentils that they eat and whatever, it's just a complement to fish. So that's the most important thing. But people who live inland and don't have access to waterways to fish, they become vegetarians out of poverty. Because there's lots of people in India, so many people, and they're very poor. Vast majority of them are very, very poor. How poor is even difficult to comprehend for people in the West. They may grow an animal, but they can't afford to eat it themselves. They sell that animal for meat to somebody, and the amount of money they get will be enough for them to buy rice for the whole year for the whole family, or lentils or something like that. So they can't afford to eat their animals. So they're vegetarians out of poverty, out of necessity, not because they have chosen to. And when they get the chance to eat some meat or eat some fish, they never say no. And why do you think cow is a sacred animal in India? Because she gives them milk, ghee, butter, cream, cheese, and animal food that can sustain their physical bodies. So Indians for thousands of years knew that without a cow, they will just perish, no matter how many vegetables they consume. They have to have that ghee, they have to have that milk. And they all have chickens and they have ducks and they eat as many eggs as they can. So whatever eggs they are produced, they put into their rice, into their vegetables. So these two animal foods sustain them. And then episodically, occasionally, they do get the chance to eat some meat, to eat something from the animals and from the fish that they can get themselves. Veganism, evangelical veganism, where a human being eats only plants and doesn't touch animal foods at all, came to India in the 1930s with the books of Nathan Pritikin. That was a New Yorker, a New York Jew, who wrote amazingly successful books promoting veganism. Millions of copies were sold. And I suspect that that was funded by someone at the time. It's probably the same forces that are working on vegan propaganda today probably was started that long ago. You know, the same sort of people, because this kind of success for a book is very unusual. Very, very unusual. So these books were sold all over the world and they came to India and they were very successful for some reason. That's where this came from. But veganism traditionally in India is considered to be a fast. There are not many of these evangelical vegans in India because it's not in their tradition. Traditionally, it's considered to be a fast because you're not feeding yourself, you are cleansing yourself in a powerful way by eating all these vegetables and all the plant matter, but you are not feeding yourself. So it is a form of fasting. This is not my idea. The first time I came to India, we had a tour, and the tour on the bus, the tour guide told us, you know, when we were driving by, he said, look at this group of people. They wear special clothes. And these are Hindu pilgrims traveling long distances across the country to their sacred sites. Part of their pilgrimage is a 42-day fast. I got interested immediately. My ears pricked up immediately. The guy didn't know anymore. And as it happened, next day I was on the beach and there was a group of these pilgrims sitting on the beach. In India, everybody speaks English. So I went and spoke to these people. And they explained to me. They said, yes, we have to fast for 42 days. And it's very difficult, very difficult. And so I said, so what kind of fast is it? Do you just drink water or are you allowed to eat something? And they said, yes, we're allowed to eat something. I said, what? So listen to this, what they're allowed to eat. They're allowed to eat rice, lentils, beans, vegetables, fruit, nuts, vegetable oils, and bread. And I thought, that's a Western vegan diet.
Yeah, right.
These people for thousands of years consider this to be a fast. They do it maximum for 42 days and only as part of their religious pilgrimage. Hindu religion is one of the oldest religions on the planet, more than 30,000 years old. So these people should know something.
Yeah.
They call it a fast. So what happens when a person becomes a vegan? Many people in our modern world are polluted. We accumulate a lot of toxicity because we live in a polluting world. And some people are overweight, so there's lots of this toxicity tucked away in fat tissue. It's a good idea for them to have a fast, to cleanse. There are many forms of fasting. And in this book, I got a whole chapter on fasting, on various forms of fasting and how to come out from a long fast appropriately. So veganism is one of these forms of fasting. So when you go on a vegan fast, you start cleansing in a powerful way and you start feeling better because a less polluted body feels much better than a polluted one. And if it is a sensible vegan, they don't just go on macaroni cheese or Coca-Cola or something like that.
Right.
They actually put some study into it and start remove the processed carbohydrates, remove sugar, remove all of that. They feel better in the first few weeks. And that is the time when they start doing their blogs and convincing the whole world that veganism is the way to go. And some even managed to write a book in that period of time. But then the body finishes cleansing. And it gives the person a signal. I finished cleansing. Feed me. I'm hungry now. How does the body do that? It gives you a desire for a roast chicken, for a steak and, with fat, for eggs and bacon, for, fish and cream and butter and things like that. Trouble is that by then, many of these people convince themselves and half the world that veganism is the right thing to do. And they don't listen to their body. They force it to continue cleansing when the body asks to be fed.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, the body has no choice but to start breaking down muscle and bone to feed vital organs, to feed the brain, the lungs, the heart, the liver, the digestive system. So the person starts losing muscle mass, starts losing bone mass. The brain tissue starts shrinking. We literally see that on scans, that the brain literally shrinks in these individuals because the brain is a high-fat organ and it requires animal fats to sustain itself, and it requires animal protein on a daily basis. The brain is a very hungry organ. The body spends at least 50% of its resources and food on feeding the brain, day in and day out. So when the brain starts shrinking and starts starving like that, these people become hangry. That's the professional term.
Yes.
Two words, angry and hungry. A starving brain makes the person angry. Their personality changes. They become very critical, very intolerant. They berate everybody who eats meat. They sort of righteous and evangelical about it. And sense of humor disappears completely. And cognitive ability reduces in a person. They very often are not able to perceive what is going on with them, what is happening with them. And they can push their body for quite a while, for a period of time. But then, this amazing phenomenon I've discovered in my clinic with my clients, with my patients. I had this boy from Edinburgh, a sweet little boy, in his 20s, who came to me. And he said, I was a vegan for 4 months. And one day I was walking along the streets of Edinburgh, distributing leaflets about veganism. And a smell of grilled chicken wafted out of a shop. I went into some kind of trance, he said. I walked into the shop. I bought the whole chicken, a hot grilled chicken, came outside, sat on the curb, and ate the whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And then, he said, I came out of this trance, and I was so ashamed of myself. And I've never told anyone about this. You're the first person I'm telling this to. Then another person told me exactly the same story, a similar story. Then another person. And then I met a lovely lady in her early 50s who was a vegan for 20 odd years. And she's writing a book about this phenomenon. What happens to these long-term vegans? When the body is starving to such a degree that it cannot tolerate it any longer, it switches off your conscious mind. It puts you in a trance and you have a binge. You binge on meat, eggs, bacon, fat, animal foods.
Wow.
Once the body gets its fill, it gets its fix, it takes the trance away. You come out of that trance. And also psychiatrists and psychologists will tell you about this phenomenon in humanity, where a human being, when the human being has some memory from the past that they're ashamed of, they put it in a little box in their mind somewhere, lock it with a key and throw away the key. They don't even remember it. It's some kind of split personality form, so that this stuff there, I don't remember, that's not me. This is me, kind of thing. They don't even remember that. Veganism destroys the human body on a very, very deep level. And if a person pushes and pushes, then they develop neurological disorders, immune disorders, and they finish up with degenerative neurological diseases like multiple sclerosis, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Guillain-Barré, and cancer.
Wow.
So veganism is a fast. It does not feed you. That is what all these young people need to understand. And because we're all unique individuals, and depending on where you live, if you live in a hot, sunny state somewhere in the south, you need to eat less. You can survive on less animal foods. You can survive on more vegetables and juices and what have you. But the further north, the more meat and fat you need, the quicker you will collapse from veganism. And recovering from a long-term veganism is a long, long trek. Very difficult to recover.
Wow.
I know. That was so good. That was so good.
I want to dive into another piece of vegan propaganda, which is that the vegan diet is kind to animals. And this is something that you cover in your book on vegetarianism. Would you be willing to spend some time discussing this topic? How is a vegan or vegetarian diet unkind to animals?
If many people in the world become vegan and vegetarian, the only way to sustain large numbers of vegans and vegetarians in the world is through industrial agriculture. Because vast majority of these people do not grow their own organic gardens.
Right.
They've never touched the soil. They don't know what a weed is. They've never seeded anything, never looked after it. And as an organic farmer, I will tell you, that is the hardest thing to do on an organic farm. And your harvest is completely unpredictable. You can do everything by the book and you don't get your harvest. You get very little, and it can be in poor quality. There's worms in it, and the slugs in there, and whatever. And it's not very edible and not very nice. So it is not possible. Every organic farmer and every organic gardener, even with a small garden, will tell you it is not possible to feed even one vegan out of a private organic garden for a year. They all eat out of supermarkets. Who stocks up supermarkets? Industrial agriculture. So the only industrial agriculture can sustain large groups of vegans and vegetarians in the world. It is impossible to do that with organic farming. Impossible. Industrial agriculture, arable particularly industrial agriculture, which grows all these plants for us, is the number one destructive force on our planet. They kill the soil. The soil is the basis of all life on our planet. That's where all life begins and ends. It's the most precious part of nature, soil under your feet. And healthy soil is a microbial community, rich microbial community. There's fungi there, fungi, which grow hundreds of meters long hyphae, protrusions like arms and legs. And along those protrusions, bacteria, viruses, and other little creatures create their villages and hamlets and towns and cities. And the fungi provide the road network in the soil, where water travels, nutrients travel, toxins are taken away, wastes are taken away. So the soil, a healthy soil under your feet, is like a highly organized city with streets, lanes, electricity supply, water supply, sewage, gas, transport, the lot. When you plow through it with a plow, or you till, or you dig, you broke all of that up. You break the mycorrhiza, you break that fungal network in there. And then you turn it upside down and you break that piece of soil completely. The city doesn't work anymore. On top of that, these farmers pour chemicals on the soil. The most destructive chemical on the soil is nitrogen fertilizer. And now arable farmers are completely addicted to nitrogen fertilizers. Nitrogen kills microbial communities in the soil. It makes the soil practically sterile. It turns the soil into a dead dust. From that rich microbial community, the soil is alive. It's a living matrix. It turns into a dead dust. This dead dust cannot hold water. When the soil is alive, the microbes produce humus. Humus is a carbon polymer. It's our healthy soils are the biggest reservoir of carbon on our planet. Majority of carbon on the planet is locked in the humus, in the soil. And it's very stable. It stays there for hundreds of years. When we plow, when we apply chemicals, we release that carbon into the atmosphere. So all the carbon in the atmosphere that they say causing global warming, that's another question, whether that's true or not, but we have carbon in the atmosphere, is due to arable agriculture, a large percent of it, to their activities. Then they say methane, all these belching cows that we have to slaughter, They've created that ridiculous lie. Vast majority of nitrogen fertilizers, when they're poured on the soil, are released as methane into the atmosphere. Whatever methane humanity has created, and it is in the atmosphere, comes from nitrogen fertilizers, not belching cows. Humans belch out as much methane as cows do. It's a complete and utter nonsense. It's nitrogen fertilizers. So the major cause of destruction of our planet is arable agriculture. The only way for all these vegans to survive is through arable industrial agriculture. So by buying their vegetables, they're supporting that form of agriculture. They're supporting the major destructive force. They're destroying the planet. Every vegan is destroying the planet, not saving the planet.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
When it comes to health, I've already discussed it and explained it to you. So it is not healthy to be a vegan and a vegetarian at all. And coming to the kindness to animals. On my farm here, we have happy animals, happy chickens. My chickens are roaming all over the farm, completely free. They're everywhere. They're having a very busy social life, and they're the happiest birds you can meet. And I'll start with the chickens. All my volunteers, when they come to my farm, they're involved in slaughtering the cockerels. Cockerels are the roosters. That's how Americans call a cockerel, a male chicken. A rooster, in England, they're called cockerels. We have chicks every year. The whole summer we're busy with chicks because most of our chickens become broody. They want to be mamas. So we isolate them, we give them a chance to hatch a family of chicks. And then they walk around the farm with this lovely clutch of chicks, about 11, 12. It's a bit sweet little families walking about. And every chick is happy. And because they've got a mother and she teaches them how to be a chicken, how to be safe, how to find food, how to stand up for themselves. And in every clutch of chicks, there's about half and half, boys and girls. And then when they've all grown up, suddenly all of these cockerels and roosters become, hit puberty, become active. The happy balance on a farm, a healthy farm and a happy farm is a balanced one, the one that has balance and harmony, where everything is feeding everything, supporting everything, and no one is being a nuisance there. A happy ratio between a male chicken and females is about 1 cockerel or rooster per minimum 5, maximum 9 hens. That's a happy harem. And about now, January, February, the cockerels start recruiting their girls, start forming these little families, their harems. And a cockerel that's formed a harem, he becomes a good husband. He doesn't hurt his chickens, he's gentle with them. He looks after them, he finds food for them, and he protects them from other cockerels. But we have half and half cockerels running around, right? Half chickens. There aren't enough girls for all the boys we have. And the boys that don't manage to form a family become hooligans. Yes, they run around in gangs.
Like in real life.
That's right. Any stray chicken they can catch, and the chickens suffer. And that just causes a chaos on the farm. So they have to go in the freezer. That's their destiny. We have developed our own, because you have to maintain the balance on the farm.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yes. So we've developed our own very humane and very loving way of slaughtering cockerels, and every volunteer goes through that. We had many vegans on our farm who initially say, oh, I can't be doing that. But once they've been through that procedure and they've observed it initially, they're plucking away and, they're perfectly happy to do it. So we thank the bird, we pick the bird up, we hold it, everybody thanks the bird, everybody strokes the bird. Then we slaughter it in such a way that we continue thanking until the spirit leaves, until the soul leaves that body. And then we process the body. Every human being needs to go through that experience. Then, because you learn something very profound on the level of your senses, without the brain being involved, without the conceptualizing mind being involved. You can't read about it in a book and understand it. You have to go through it. And once you've been through that experience, nobody can bamboozle you anymore. Nobody will tell you that killing is wrong. There's nothing wrong with killing whatsoever. When you come as a guest to someone's home, what is the right thing to do? To follow the rules of that home or to dictate to the host your own rules?
Right.
You know, how is this world created? By the one who created it. Everything eats everything. Everything's recycled. Nothing goes to waste. When we die and we're in the soil, the plants, the trees will eat us. The microbes will eat us. That way, there's no waste, and everything feeds on everything, and everything supports everything in this world. And here comes a vegan and says, this is all wrong. Everybody should live forever.
Yeah.
Nobody should be killed. Nobody should be whatever. So it's very important to go through the process, somebody of killing an animal or killing a bird or killing something, but it has to be done only for food, not for sport, not for any other reason, only for food, to feed yourself, to sustain your own body. And it needs to be done in a loving, humane way. And when you do that, when you stroke the bird, they understand. They may not understand English, but they get the feeling. They get the emotion. So when they understand that there is no aggression, there is no violence here, that everybody around are loving and kind, and understand, that they are thanking this little creature, they calm down. It's just amazing to observe and amazing to experience. And I grew up with that because I was fortunate enough to grow up in a traditional society. My granddad, my grandparents had a farm and in a village, and when they would slaughter lambs or slaughter something else, I was 3 years old, 4, 5. I was given a little knife and we were skinning together, and children were never screamed from it. Children observed how it's done. It was done kindly and was done without violence. And children always were present and they observed. That is why people who grew up from children in that society never had this kind of idea that killing is wrong. There's nothing wrong with it, with killing.
Yep.
And you need to understand also, as we were talking about the role of animal foods in the human body and plant foods, I've mentioned that human beings can live without plants perfectly well, but we cannot live without animal foods. We simply cannot survive. That is how the Creator has created us. That is the rules of this world. I came across this phenomenon first some 10, 15 years ago when a group of mothers from USA contacted me with breastfed babies, exclusively breastfed babies, who were diagnosed with FPIES. That's food protein-induced enterocolitis syndrome. It's quite a mouthful. It was a new diagnosis at that time. Now it's becoming almost an epidemic. It's growing in numbers. What we have here, we have an exclusively breastfed little darling, a few weeks old, vomiting diarrhea. The child is losing weight and not developing. Instead of growing, baby's supposed to grow quite fast. They're losing weight and they're not developing. Doctors do testing, find that the child's allergic to every protein on the planet. So the parents then are given a synthetic formula, the breastfeeding stops, and they're told that the child cannot have any protein. Give him some carrots or something. These children, if they follow the mainstream protocols, they develop profound mental and physical disabilities, and many don't survive. So as I started working with these babies, what I've realized and I discovered that they cannot tolerate any plant matter at all. We had to remove all plants. These babies lived entirely on meat stock, on boiled gelatinous meats, on raw egg yolks, and on kefir, and then sour cream. And it took us minimum 4-5 years to be able to introduce a morsel of a vegetable into their diet. They lived on this entirely no plant gaps diet for 4-5 years. Some are still on it. That is the hardest thing to introduce for them, for these kids. And as we removed plant matter, we started putting weight on, diarrhea stopped, vomiting stopped, the child started growing and developing.
Wow.
And all of these children are now beautiful, healthy children. There are no disabilities, no problems.
Wow.
So these children taught me that human beings can live perfectly well without eating plants at all.
Right.
We don't need 5 a day, or 10 a day, or 15 a day, or whatever it is. That is all corporate propaganda. We don't need any of it. We can live without plants perfectly well, but we cannot live without eating animal foods. And that's what huge numbers of vegans have demonstrated to me conclusively.
Wow.
So we need to understand that we are guests in this world. We come for a short period of time here. We are born into this material world. We create a body for ourselves to survive in this world. And then we leave this body when we get old and we die. We leave this body so it decays and feeds other forms of life, and we leave. We depart from this world. So while we're here for that short period of time, we have to obey Mother Nature. We have to obey the rules of the one who created this world and who's in charge of this world.
Wow.
Wow. I am like going to go home and eat a roast. That was so amazing.
No, it's incredible. I mean, I think it's so incredible. And I think that brings us to a good point that I know we wanted to cover too. And I'm sure this could be an episode in and of itself, and we want to respect your time. But would you be able to talk to us about 2 points? One is cholesterol. There's, and I know that this could be high level because, like I said, this could be an episode in and of itself. Yep. But the need for cholesterol, and then could you just touch on the point of raw meat, because you talk about that in your book, eating raw meat, and I think that that's something that's so misunderstood in our culture. Do you have time to address those principles with us?
Absolutely. With cholesterol, it would be good to do another interview.
Yes.
Okay. It's quite a big subject.
Agreed.
I have a book on that subject.
I'm writing that down.
Yeah, we would love that.
That book, which explains that animal fats and cholesterol do not cause heart disease. And where
like
that
propaganda.
From.
Yep.
It's another propaganda. That's right. They do not cause heart disease. They're essential for human beings to eat. So we can discuss that. And the second question was?
Raw meat. Talk to us a little bit about raw meat.
Yes, raw meat. There are dishes with raw meat all over the world, practically in every cuisine, every traditional cuisine. There are some dishes with raw meat. And when the Europeans came to Americas, they discovered that local tribes, the Native Americans, they ate raw meat. In fact, majority of meat was consumed in raw form. When a deer was brought into the tribe, when the men caught a deer, and the first thing they would do, they would get the liver out of that, and then the liver was shared raw between every member of the tribe immediately. Everybody immediately had a little piece of raw liver. And then they would deal with the rest of the carcass, with the rest of the animal. Raw meat is easier to digest, easier to assimilate, because it has the life force in it, and it has enzymes in it, and all the vitamins and minerals and proteins and other substances in the meat are in a pristine form, which is the easiest for human body to assimilate. So eating raw meat is good for us, healthy for us. It's just that in our culture, people are not used to it, and many people wouldn't even consider such a thing. But in the Vegetarianism Explained, where I explain how to come out from a long fast. If a person decided to fast for a while, on water, for example. Some people fast on water for 21 days, for 7 days, for 2 weeks. Some even manage 40 days on water. And practically in every fasting book, they tell you to come out from that fast, you have to become a vegan. They're dead set on making you a vegan. Right. To come out on plant foods. I've been to vegan retreats. There are some well-established ones in Europe, and they're all the same. They all try to turn you into a vegan when you come out from the fast, because I have fasted myself. And in my book, I explain how to come out appropriately. And you largely eat raw meat. You marinate it. You make marinades, which are delicious, with lemon juice, with honey in it, with some salt and pepper and spices and some greenery. You just marinate for a few hours, and it's absolutely scrumptious. You can eat raw chicken, and you can eat raw lamb and beef. And if it's my pork from my farm, you can eat raw too, because my pigs are healthy and clean. There's nothing wrong with eating that. So eating raw meat is good for us, and it's particularly useful because after fasting, and the longer the fast is, the more your digestive system shuts down. to get it going, to get it to start producing all the digestive juices and digestive enzymes, you have to train it gradually, slowly. So in the initial stages, by eating raw meats, you rekindle your digestive system and it's easier to digest.
Wow.
Wow.
I can confirm too that that's true. I worked in the kitchen for my church. This was several years ago, but we had a guest from Brazil who was helping in the kitchen, and we were making we had raw chicken. We were marinating it, and he pulled some of the raw chicken and ate it. And all of us were like, "Oh gosh, like don't raw chicken. Don't eat that." And he said something that it was long before I ever became a nutritionist or knew anything about nutrition. But he said, well, where I am from in Brazil, this is not uncommon to taste the raw chicken or to eat the raw chicken. He said, I will not get sick from eating it because I have the microbes in my gut that are needed to process a food like that. But you probably would get sick if you just had some without like allowing your body to adapt to it because you don't have the microbes. Because he was pointing out in America, we're so hyper vigilant about being clean, about never having microbes, that we almost are like stripping our bodies of this microbial communities that they need to have this healthy immune system to deal with something like raw meat, where we are so hyper hygienic. We've almost like sterilized ourselves and can't process those things and don't have the good immune systems. But because he was always having those foods, he had a great immune system. It was no problem for him. It was really interesting.
Well, I find that a lot of people in the Western world can eat raw meat perfectly fine.
Okay.
It's just the mental block
Yeah.
that people have, because we human beings are powerful creatures. Whatever you program for yourself, you get.
Right.
Yes.
And if you programmed yourself, oh, raw meat is dangerous, I'll get sick, you'll get sick.
Right.
You programmed it
Yes.
for yourself. But if you tell yourself, no, this is perfectly safe, and in order to feel that way, you have to prepare it yourself. It's important when you eat raw meat. It's important that it's fresh, very fresh, and it hasn't been sealed in plastic. If there is no choice and you have to buy it in plastic, then you have to take it out of plastic, wash it carefully, and cut off at least an inch of all the meat that was in touch with plastic.
Oh.
And eat only what's inside.
Wow.
It must not touch plastic at all. In fact, traditionally, meats were wrapped in cloth, in cotton cloth. That's the most hygienic and good way to do it, in a cotton cloth. And if it's dry, if it hasn't been wet, the cloth stays dry. If the meat hasn't been washed. Before you just bring it home, you take it out of the cloth and you wash it, and it's perfectly fine, perfectly good in that sense. So if a person makes it himself and he makes the marinade, put a bit of honey there and squeeze a whole lemon and put all your spices and your garlic and your pepper, and it all smells good, and you can add some vinegar if you want, and then you mix the whole thing. And the excellent thing to mix these meats with are fermented vegetables. Your homemade fermented vegetables, particularly if they've got some chili in them, some spices in them, and then leave it for a couple of hours at a room temperature, and it's ready.
Wow.
Once a person we have senses with human beings. Or when you use your senses to prepare your food, when you touch the food with your hands receive colossal amount of information about that food. The information that your conscious mind cannot perceive, but your brain gets it. And not just the brain, your whole body gets it. Your whole spirit gets it, that's information. And the way the food what kind of noises it makes when you touch it, the look of it, and then the smell of it, and then the taste of it. When we use all the senses, we get complete information about that piece of food. Then nobody can deceive you. Nobody can bamboozle you. You will know, is this good for me or not? You will, on a very, very deep level, bypassing this knob here.
Yeah.
Which interferes always.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hoo-wee. That
Well,
was so good.
I know we could talk to you for another 7 hours probably.
Yes.
As always. But yes, oh my gosh, I feel like this is such a great place for us to let our listeners process this information and understand it, because this is a paradigm shift on
Yes.
so many levels for
Yes.
so many listeners. And I know you're probably going to need to come back to this episode and listen to it again and again and again to sort of wash away that propaganda. It really is a huge paradigm shift. I mean, we just have been so like bombarded, inoculated with this misinformation. So Dr. Natasha, thank you for bringing light and truth to the subject, just like you did in our interview with the GAPS diet. Is there anything in closing that we haven't covered that you want to mention? Let us know.
Thank you for your interview. Thank you for your work. Thank you for spreading the word. It's wonderful. And I hope your listeners get good information from it. Start touching your food. Start using your senses. It's very, very important. I talk about it here again in this book. And read this book. It's not a big book.
It's an easy read.
Read it, quite quickly. You will get a lot of very important information. We have to understand that in the mainstream, the way our mainstream functions nowadays, practically everything they tell you, you have to turn it upside down, and then you will see the truth. So keep doing that. Keep turning things upside down. And you will see the truth.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Dr. Natasha Campbell.
It's a pleasure.
You are a renegade. You're one of us, and we really appreciate you. And to our listeners, go home and eat some meat and go be renegades.
Go be renegades. Thank you, Dr. Natasha. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Nutrition Podcast.
Please keep in mind that this podcast is an educational service that provides general health information. The content on this podcast is not a substitute for direct, personal, professional medical care and diagnosis. You should always talk to your doctor before making a dietary or lifestyle change. Go be renegades!
Go be renegades!